Okay. Stop scrolling. Stop whatever you're doing right now. Because something just happened in South Philadelphia that every single Eagles fan, actually, every single football fan, needs to know about. Something shifted at training camp. Something clicked. And once you hear what went down out there on those practice fields, you're going to feel it too. That excitement. That electric buzz that only shows up when a team stops being good and starts becoming something dangerous. Because this isn't just another training camp story. This is the beginning of something. And you're here for it. Welcome back. Sit down. Get comfortable. Because today, we're going all the way inside the Philadelphia Eagles 2026 training camp. We're going to walk through every moment, every big play, every raised eyebrow, and every dropped jaw from the coaches standing on the sideline. We're going to talk about Jalen Hurts and what he's doing differently that has everyone leaning in. We're going to talk about a brand new offense that looks nothing, and I mean nothing, like what Eagles fans have watched for the last 5 years. We're going to meet some new faces, revisit some familiar ones, and figure out exactly why so many people are buzzing about this team right now. So take a deep breath. Because this is going to be a long one. And every second of it is worth it. Let's go. First, before we even step onto that practice field, we need to set the scene. We need to understand where the Philadelphia Eagles are coming from, because context is everything. Picture this. It's early 2026. The Eagles have just come off a 2025 season that, by Philadelphia standards, was disappointing. Now, disappointment is relative, right? Because this is still a team that made the playoffs for the 5th straight season. This is still a team with real talent. But anyone who watched the Eagles play in 2025 knew something was off. The offense, the same offense that had been dominant for years, looked sluggish. It looked stale. It looked predictable. Jalen Hurts threw for more yards in 2025 than he did in 2024. But his efficiency dropped. His yards per attempt fell from 8 all the way down to 7.1. Saquon Barkley, the man who had just rushed for over 2,000 yards and won Offensive Player of the Year in 2024, saw his numbers take a hit too. He went from nearly 6 yards per carry to just 4.1. A.J. Brown, one of the most feared wide receivers in the entire league, saw his per-game production fall. And suddenly, everyone around the NFL was asking the same uncomfortable question. Has the Eagles' offense hit its ceiling? And then, quietly, behind the scenes, the Eagles' front office started making moves. Howie Roseman, the general manager who somehow always seems to find a way, started reshaping this team. He hired a brand new offensive coordinator named Sean Mannion. He let A.J. Brown go. He brought in Dontayvion Wicks from Green Bay. He used a first-round draft pick on a young receiver from USC named Makai Lemon. He looked at his roster, looked at his head coach Nick Sirianni, looked at Jalen Hurts, and essentially said, "We're blowing this thing up and building something better." That's bold. That is genuinely bold. Because when you have a team that's made 5 straight playoffs, most organizations play it safe. They tinker at the edges. They tweak a few things here and there. They don't tear down the offensive system that's been the foundation of everything and replace it with something completely new. But the Eagles? They went all in. And now, here we are. Training Camp 2026. The Jefferson Health Training Complex in South Philadelphia, the place formerly known as the NovaCare Complex. The practice fields are green. The summer air is thick and warm. The fans who got lucky enough to grab tickets to open practices are crammed behind the ropes, straining their necks, trying to catch a glimpse of what this new Eagles offense looks like in real time. And what they saw, what reporters saw, what coaches saw, what even the defensive players on the other side of the ball saw, left a lot of people very, very interested. Let's start from the very beginning. Day 1. It's Wednesday morning, July 29th, 2026. The Eagles walk onto that practice field for the first official training camp session of the new season. No pads yet. The whole thing lasts about 70 to 80 minutes. But for everyone watching, those 70 minutes might as well have been a preview of a movie they've been waiting years to see. And the first thing everyone notices? Jalen Hurts is standing under center. Now I know that might sound like a small thing. Quarterbacks stand under center all the time. But for Eagles fans, this is actually a really big deal. Because for most of Nick Sirianni's time in Philadelphia, Hurts has operated primarily out of the shotgun. The Eagles. have been a shotgun-heavy team. And while that worked beautifully in certain stretches, it also became something defenses started to figure out. But here, on day one of this new era, Jalen Hurts is under center. Repeatedly. He's taking snaps. He's using play-action fakes. He's manipulating linebackers and safeties with his eyes and his movement before the ball even leaves his hand. And reporters standing on the sideline are literally scribbling notes, nudging each other, whispering, "Did you see that? Is this real?" Yes, it is real. Because what the Eagles are installing in 2026 isn't just a new play or a new formation. They're installing an entirely new offensive philosophy. Sean Mannion, the first-time offensive coordinator who came over from Green Bay, is bringing a system built from the Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. These are the two men responsible for building some of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL over the last decade. McVay turned the Los Angeles Rams into a powerhouse. Shanahan has had the San Francisco 49ers consistently among the best offensive teams in football. Their system emphasizes motion before the snap, heavy play action, under-center formations, and something called wide zone running. A scheme where offensive linemen don't just try to overpower defenders, they move laterally, they create angles, they pull defenders out of position and open huge lanes for running backs. Now think about what this means for Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley has been one of the best running backs in the NFL for years. And even in 2025, when his numbers dipped, nobody questioned his talent. People questioned how he was being used. Barkley himself admitted it. He'd been watching film of Todd Gurley for months. Gurley, who was one of the most dominant running backs in football during his peak years with the Rams under McVay. And Barkley saw what Gurley did in that system. He saw the cuts, the vision, the space that opened up. And Barkley basically told anyone who would listen, "I want that. I want to run in a system like that." And now he gets to. And from what we've seen at training camp, the early results are incredibly encouraging. On day one alone, Barkley was breaking multiple runs into the secondary. He was finding holes. He was hitting cutback lanes that weren't there a split second before. The combination of better blocking angles and his own elite vision created these moments where you'd look up and suddenly Barkley had 5, 6, 7 yards before anyone could react. But that's just the run game. Let's talk about what Jalen Hurts is doing on top of all of this. Because this is where things get really good. Jalen Hurts has always been a fascinating quarterback. Since he came into the NFL, the debate about him never really stopped. Is he elite? Is he just system-dependent? Is he a guy who can carry a team, or does he need everything around him to be perfect? And here's what makes Hurts so compelling. He's never just answered those questions by talking. He answers them by playing, by improving, by showing up every single year with something new in his game. In 2022, he was an MVP candidate. In 2024, he was a Super Bowl champion. And now, heading into 2026, he's got something to prove again. Not to the outside world, necessarily, but to himself. Because players like Hurts, the ones who are driven at the deepest level, they always have something to prove. That internal fire never goes out. And you could see it on that first day of camp. Reporters who watch him every single day said something had changed. Something subtle but real. Jalen Hurts was throwing over the middle. Repeatedly. Targeting running backs. Hitting tight end Dallas Goedert in rhythm. Reading through his progressions faster than he had before. And just the way he was standing at the line of scrimmage, hands under center, eyes scanning the defense, completely calm, looked different than what Eagles fans had become accustomed to seeing. One of the absolute best moments from day one came during 7-on-7 drills. Hurts dropped back and fired a throw down the middle of the seam to second-year receiver Darius Cooper. And this wasn't just a throw. This was a precise anticipatory dart, meaning Hurts didn't wait for Cooper to come open. He threw to where Cooper was going to be before Cooper was there. That's the kind of trust and timing that you build with receivers over months of work. And there was Cooper, going full extension, diving through the air, reaching for the ball in tight coverage, pulling it in and hanging on as he hit the ground. The place went electric. And here's what makes this even more interesting. Darius Cooper is not a famous name. He's not a first-round pick. He's a second-year receiver who came into the league as an undrafted free agent out of Tarleton State, a school that most football fans have probably never heard of. But he earned a roster spot last year. He worked his way up from the bottom. And now in 2026, he's coming back with the confidence of a guy who knows he belongs. And that catch, that incredible diving grab in coverage, put everyone at training camp on notice. But the story of day one doesn't end there. Because on a completely different level, there's the quarterback himself, continuing to evolve and impress. Hurts hit DeVonta Smith back-to-back. He connected with Dontayvion Wicks. He found his running backs in the flat. He was decisive. Clean. The ball came out quickly and went exactly where it needed to go. One reporter noted that the offense looked significantly more functional than it had during spring practices, when Vic Fangio's defense had dominated. The difference was clear. The installation was clicking. And Jalen Hurts was at the center of all of it. After practice, Hurts was asked about DeVonta Smith, the man now stepping into the role of undisputed WR1 after the departure of A.J. Brown. And Hurts, in his typical measured way, just said Smith is smooth. Said he's always been very polished. Simple words. But from Jalen Hurts, that's actually high praise. Because Hurts doesn't throw superlatives around. When he says something like that, you listen. Let's talk about DeVonta Smith for a moment. Because this is one of the biggest storylines of this entire training camp, and maybe one of the biggest storylines in the NFL heading into 2026. 4 years, Smith was brilliant in his role. A polished, reliable, technically excellent wide receiver who lined up alongside A.J. Brown and thrived in that secondary position. He averaged over 1,000 receiving yards per season despite never really being the first option. He ran crisp routes. He made tough catches. He was everything you could want in a number 2 receiver. But now, A.J. Brown is gone. Traded away in an off-season move that shocked the football world. And suddenly, DeVonta Smith isn't the number 2 anymore. He's the number 1. He's the guy defenses have to plan for first. He's the one who has to carry the passing game when things get tight. And to his credit, Smith isn't running from this. In camp, he said the biggest adjustment has been understanding the new system, the new terminology, the new flow of how plays are called and how the offense moves. But he also said something really telling. He said once you understand how Sean Mannion wants to do things, it becomes easy. Easy. That's a word you want to hear from your new WR1 talking about a brand new offensive system. Jordan Mailata, the Eagles' massive left tackle who's been one of the best offensive linemen in football, gave Sean Mannion maybe the most memorable compliment of all camp. He called Mannion an evil genius. Because of how clearly and cleverly Mannion presents information. Because of how the scheme makes sense once it's explained, but looks chaotic and confusing to the defense trying to defend it. That right there. That is exactly what you want in an offensive coordinator. Someone who's a genius to his own players and a nightmare for everyone else trying to figure him out. And from day one at training camp, that genius was visible on the field. The Eagles were using pre-snap motion more than they ever had before. Receivers moving before the snap. Running backs shifting. Tight ends aligning in unusual spots. All of it designed to get defenders moving, get them thinking, get them out of their comfort zones before the ball is even snapped. And then, play action. A fake to the running back. Defenders who were already slightly off balance crash toward the line of scrimmage, and suddenly there's Jalen Hurts, standing tall in the pocket with a receiver wide open behind him. This is the offense of the future. And the Eagles are installing it right now. In the summer. In the heat. In front of everyone watching. Day 2 arrives. July 30th, 2026. Another day at Jefferson Health Training Complex. And if day 1 was a promising appetizer, day 2 was something more complicated. Something more realistic. Because training camp is never just a highlight reel. It's a place where truths get revealed, both the good ones and the uncomfortable ones. And the truth that emerged on day 2 was this: the Eagles' defense is going to be very, very good. Possibly great. In the very first team period of the second day, Jalen Hurts stepped up under center and immediately ran into a wall. The defense, led by Vic Fangio, who is now entering his 3rd year running this unit, came out with intensity. There was pressure from the defensive front. There were coverage sacks, where Hurts had nowhere to throw and had to eat the ball. The defenders were physical. Coordinated. Alert. Reporters on the sideline noted that for stretches of the day, there was simply nowhere for Hurts to go with the football. The defense was just that locked in. And here's why that matters. Because a great defense doesn't just win games on Sundays. A great defense makes the offense better every single week in practice. When Jalen Hurts faces an elite defense in training camp every single day, he gets sharper. His reads improve faster. His footwork tightens up. His decision-making accelerates. You can't replicate that kind of work against soft coverage or slow linebackers. Fangio's defense has Jalen Carter, who we'll get to in a moment, along with Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell at linebacker, Cooper DeJean doing something completely unique at the safety position, and Quinyon Mitchell at cornerback absolutely cooking receivers in practice. This is a stacked, experienced defense. And they pushed the Eagles' offense hard on day 2. But even in that adversity, there were moments that made you lean forward and watch more closely. Because in the middle of all that defensive dominance, Jalen Hurts pulled the ball on a play-action pass from under center, looked up the seam, and delivered a beautiful strike to Dallas Goedert. Perfectly in rhythm. Ball arrived right as Goedert was breaking open. Couldn't have been placed better. And there it is. That connection. That chemistry between a quarterback and his tight end that can absolutely dismantle a defense when it's working. Dallas Goedert has been one of the best tight ends in football for years, and in this new Shanahan-style offense, tight ends are central to everything. They get spread across the formation. They create mismatches. They run routes into zones that linebackers can't cover and safeties can't get to in time. And Hurts, threading that needle to Goedert in practice, even on a day when the defense was winning, told everyone watching exactly what to expect when the season begins. But honestly, the play of day 2 didn't come from Hurts. It didn't come from a veteran. It came from a young receiver named Dontayvion Wicks, doing something so outrageous that the Eagles' official Twitter account had to post it immediately. Let's set the scene. It's late in Thursday's practice. Jalen Hurts is on the run. He's moving outside the pocket, feeling pressure, scrambling. And he lets go of a deep ball downfield, slightly underthrown, slightly off target, but still carrying enough distance to get there. Out in front of him, Wicks is running a deep route. And waiting for him, 2 defensive backs. Jacorian Bennett and Cole Wisniewski. Double coverage. 2 defenders between the receiver and the football. Most receivers don't make that catch. In that situation, the vast majority of receivers break off the route or come up short or get their hands slapped away at the last second. It's too much to ask. 2 bodies. 1 ball. You do the math. But Wicks didn't do the math. Wicks climbed the ladder. At 6'1", 206 pounds, Dontayvion Wicks went up, and I mean up, and pulled that ball down out of the sky over both defenders. About 35 to 40 yards downfield. In double coverage. A contested catch that had the entire practice field reacting. Nick Sirianni, the head coach, immediately compared Wicks to Keenan Allen. For those who don't know, Keenan Allen is one of the best receivers of his generation. A guy with elite route running ability, elite hands, elite competitive nature. That comparison doesn't get made lightly. Sirianni doesn't throw out names like Keenan Allen unless he sees something real. After practice, the Eagles posted that clip and wrote, "I like that." And yeah, so does everyone else. Wicks came over in a trade from the Green Bay Packers. He's 25 years old. He's been a guy who people around the league have known about without ever really getting his proper moment in the spotlight. Now, in Philadelphia, in this new offense, competing for that number 2 receiver spot alongside DeVonta Smith, he might be about to get that moment. Let's pause for a second and talk about what this new receiver room actually looks like. Because this is crucial to understanding the Eagles' offense going forward. A.J. Brown is gone. Let that sink in. Gone. One of the most physically imposing, statistically dominant wide receivers in football is no longer wearing midnight green. He was traded. And any time you lose a player of that caliber, there's a gap. A real, genuine gap that has to be filled. But here's the thing about the Eagles' philosophy. They don't try to replace elite players with one direct copy. They restructure around the talent they do have and build something new. So what does the room look like now? DeVonta Smith is the WR1. Stepping into a role she's more than earned through years of excellence and professionalism. Dontayvion Wicks is competing hard for the WR2 spot and, based on camp, is making a very strong case. And then there's Makai Lemon, the first-round pick out of USC. The rookie. The future. Lemon is a slot receiver, a guy who lines up in the middle of the formation and does the dirty work that often doesn't show up in highlight reels but wins football games. He's physically polished for a rookie. Quick out of his stance. Smart with his routes. And from day one at camp, he was on the field with the first-team offense, running crossing routes, being used heavily in pre-snap motion, getting early looks from Hurts. He's not going to come in and immediately dominate. He's a rookie. The transition from college to the NFL is always a learning process. But the early returns suggest he belongs. And in this system, a system designed around motion and misdirection and quick, precise throws, a smart, quick slot receiver is absolutely essential. Beyond those three, you've got Hollywood Brown, who brings his own experience and athleticism to the room. You've got Darius Cooper, the second-year undrafted guy who's already shown he can make NFL-caliber plays under pressure. You've got guys competing for roster spots, battling in every rep of every practice. And maybe the most underappreciated piece of this entire offense? Dallas Goedert, the tight end who, in this new system, is going to be asked to do things he's never quite done before at this level. Goedert is elite. He can line up in so many different spots. He can run routes as a wide receiver. He can block in the running game. He's the Swiss Army knife in Sean Mannion's system, and from the looks of day 2, Hurts is already deeply connected with him. Now let's talk about Jaylen Carter. Because no conversation about the 2026 Philadelphia Eagles is complete without talking about Jalen Carter. Before training camp even began, Carter made news. Massive news. He signed a contract extension that made him the highest-paid defensive tackle in NFL history. $106 million in guaranteed money. $38 million per year on average. Both figures were records at the position when the deal was signed. Let that number sit in your brain for a second. The highest-paid defensive tackle ever. And you know what? When you watch Jalen Carter in practice, you understand every single dollar. Because the man is a force of nature. When he lines up next to fellow Georgia alum Jordan Davis on the interior of the Eagles' defensive line, what you're watching is two mountains of humanity trying to collapse the pocket from the inside out. Carter's power and drive off the snap is unlike anything most offensive linemen have seen. He doesn't just beat blocks, he throws them aside. He generates pressure from angles and positions that shouldn't even be possible for a man his size. In practice, defensive players tend to take it a little easy on their own offensive guys. Pull up slightly. Don't go full speed. Protect each other. That's just camp culture. You don't want to injure your own teammates before the season even starts. But watching Carter on those practice reps, even at reduced intensity, you can see the raw gifts. The explosion out of the stance. The hand work. The feel for where the center of gravity is and how to manipulate it. This is a player who was already considered elite and now, with a massive contract and something to prove, because great players always have something to prove, he's going to be an absolute problem for opposing offenses all season long. Day 3 rolls around. And now the tempo is picking up. The energy at practice is different. Reporters are noticing more creative wrinkles in the offense. More sophisticated play designs. And Hurts is throwing the ball with confidence and accuracy that has become the defining theme of this early camp. One of the most telling aspects of Hurts' performance so far? He's throwing to running backs more than usual. Much more. In the traditional Eagles offense, running backs were primarily blockers and ball carriers. They caught some passes, sure. But they weren't high-priority targets in the passing game. That's changing under Sean Mannion. Because in the Shanahan-style offense, running backs are weapons in the passing game. They run routes out of the backfield. They leak into the flat. They run wheel routes up the sideline. They become mismatches for linebackers who can't keep up with their speed, or safeties who can't match their cut-and-go quickness. Saquon Barkley, who is already one of the best receiving backs in football when used that way, is now being deployed even more aggressively as a pass catcher. And what's fascinating is that Barkley himself has talked about this with genuine excitement. He compared learning this new system to learning a new language. He said when he first got into it, there was a lot of new vocabulary, new concepts, new ways of thinking about the game. But then something clicked. And suddenly, it became exciting instead of confusing. That process, that moment when the complexity of a system becomes clarity, is what coaches dream about when they install a new offense. And with Barkley, it seems to be happening at exactly the right time. There's also the matter of Tank Bigsby. This is a name that Eagles fans should get very familiar with. Because Bigsby has come into camp and been electric. He rotates with Barkley on first-team reps. He breaks runs into the secondary. He brings what reporters have repeatedly described as juice, that kind of energy and burst and excitement that makes coaches' heads turn and fans lean over the railing just to get a better look. Bigsby ran for 344 yards on just 58 carries last season, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry. Meanwhile, Barkley, despite his excellence, averaged just over 4 yards per carry. And the honest reality is that the Eagles probably should have used Bigsby more. He was better per carry, more explosive, more unpredictable. And now, in a new system with a new coordinator who's looking at this roster with fresh eyes, Bigsby is making it impossible to ignore him. A two-headed running back attack with Barkley and Bigsby, both explosive in different ways, both thriving in a wide zone scheme designed to create the exact type of run lanes they need? That is terrifying for any defensive coordinator trying to game plan against this team. Let me take you back to a specific moment from the early days of camp that I think perfectly encapsulates what the Eagles are building. It's during 7-on-7 drills. The offense is lining up, no defensive linemen, just the passing game and the secondary going against each other. Jalen Hurts is in the huddle. He looks at his receivers. He looks at the coverage. And then he takes the snap, sets his feet, and fires. The ball is going deep. Down the seam. A trajectory that requires perfect placement because there's a safety rotating toward it. And Hurts isn't just throwing toward the receiver, he's throwing to a spot, expecting Darius Cooper to arrive exactly there at exactly the right moment. Cooper runs his route. He gets loose in the secondary. He turns his head back. And the ball is already in the air, coming right at him, placed in that window of space between the safety closing in and the cornerback trailing behind. Cooper goes horizontal. He dives. He stretches his arms as far as they'll go. And he catches the ball. And holds on through the hit with the ground. And the crowd behind the ropes erupts. These are the moments that build a team. These are the moments that build trust between a quarterback and his receivers. Hurts trusted Cooper enough to throw the ball before Cooper was open. Cooper trusted Hurts enough to run his route exactly right, knowing the ball would be there. And when it works, when that trust is rewarded with a spectacular catch, both players come away better. More connected. More confident. That's what's happening in Philadelphia right now. Now let's zoom out for a moment. Because individual plays and individual moments are exciting, but what we're really trying to understand is the bigger picture. What kind of team are the Eagles in 2026? What are they capable of? What could this season look like? And to answer that, we have to look at the full context. On offense, you have a quarterback in Jalen Hurts who has won a Super Bowl and is entering what should be the absolute prime years of his career. You have Saquon Barkley, still one of the best running backs in football, in a system tailor-made for his skill set. You have DeVonta Smith stepping into the role of WR1 with something to prove. You have Dallas Goedert as one of the best tight ends in the game. You have a brand new, dynamic, creative offensive system under Sean Mannion that emphasizes motion, deception, and exploiting mismatches. And you have a cast of younger players, Wicks, Lemon, Cooper, Bigsby, who are pushing for playing time and raising the collective level. On defense, you have a unit entering its third year under Vic Fangio, one of the greatest defensive minds the sport has ever produced. You have Jaylen Carter, the highest-paid defensive tackle in NFL history, anchoring the interior alongside Jordan Davis. You have Quinyon Mitchell developing into one of the best cornerbacks in football. You have Cooper DeJean doing things in the secondary that coaches have described as genuinely unique, playing safety in base defense, sliding to nickel corner in certain packages, and affecting the game in ways that are hard to scheme against. You have Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell at linebacker. This is a group that has playoff-caliber talent at nearly every position, and in year 3 of Fangio's system, they should be at their most comfortable and most dangerous. Take a step back. Look at both sides of the ball. What do you see? You see a team that could be very, very good. But let's be honest for a second. Because training camp optimism is a beautiful and dangerous thing. Every team looks great in shorts and helmets on a summer practice field. Every quarterback looks sharp when there are no pads and no real game pressure. Every receiver looks like a future Pro Bowler when the coverage is just a little bit lighter than it'll be in a real game. The Eagles have real questions too. And I want to respect you enough to talk about them. Question number 1. Can Sean Mannion really install this offense quickly enough? This is a massive, sweeping change. An entirely new offensive system with new terminology, new formations, new concepts. Players have been learning it since the spring. But learning something in shorts in May is very different from executing it flawlessly in January when the stakes are everything. The process takes time. And the early regular season games might be bumpy as Hurts and his teammates find their footing in something so new. Question number 2. Can DeVonta Smith handle the weight of being WR1? He's a brilliant football player. Nobody questions that. But being a true number 1 receiver means drawing the best coverage every week. The best corners. The most attention from coordinators. It's a different kind of pressure. And while Smith's talent is not in doubt, the jury is still out on how he handles the full weight of that role over a 16-plus game season. Question number 3. Is the receiving core deep enough? A.J. Brown leaving creates a gap that no single player can fill. Wicks, Lemon, Cooper, Hollywood Brown, they're all talented. But collectively, can they compensate for one of the most productive wide receivers in the NFL? That's a legitimate question that only the season itself can answer. Question number 4. What happens if the offensive line has problems? The Eagles have one of the best offensive lines in football, anchored by Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. But the interior has been a concern at various points. If the line struggles to protect Hurts or doesn't open lanes consistently for the running game, this entire offensive revolution becomes much harder to pull off. These are real concerns. They deserve to be named. But here's the thing, and this is why training camp matters so much. What we've seen in the first days of practice suggests that the Eagles are taking these challenges seriously. They're not sleepwalking through anything. Hurts is sharp and engaged. The coaching staff is innovative. The players are competing hard. And the overall vibe from Jefferson Health Training Complex isn't one of a team going through the motions. It's one of a team with something to prove. Let's talk about one more player who's been a quiet standout in these early days. A player who doesn't generate the same headlines as Hurts or Barkley or Carter, but who represents something very important about what this Eagles team is made of. Darius Cooper, the undrafted receiver from Tarleton State. Think about his story for a second. He wasn't drafted. He wasn't given anything. He showed up to the Eagles organization as a long shot. A guy with raw talent but no guarantee of a roster spot. He worked through training camp last year and earned his place the hard way, by outplaying expectations and making catches that nobody thought an undrafted rookie from a school like Tarleton State had any business making at the NFL level. And now he's back in 2026, no longer a surprise, no longer a question mark, and absolutely determined to prove he belongs. He was one of the most productive receivers in the early days of camp. Making difficult catches. Running precise routes. Creating connections with Hurts that speak to real work done over the offseason. Why does this matter? Because teams that win championships are never just their stars. They're the depth. The guys who fight for everything. The guys who come in with nothing and earn something. Every great roster has players like Darius Cooper. And right now, the Eagles have one who looks ready for a real role. Rookie watch. Let's talk about the young guys. Makai Lemon, the first-round pick, is doing something really encouraging in these early days. He's not trying to do too much. For a rookie wide receiver, the temptation to try to make big plays and stand out in every single rep is enormous. But Lemon has been smart. He's running his routes. He's using his quickness in motion. He's building his relationship with Hurts on. Here's a thought experiment. And I want you to really think about this with me. Imagine you're Jalen Hurts. You've won a Super Bowl. You've had your doubters, you've silenced them, you've stood on that stage with the Lombardi Trophy. Most people would spend the off-season celebrating, letting the moment breathe, living in the glory of what they've accomplished. But that's not Jalen Hurts. Because Hurts is already studying, already working, already breaking down film of quarterbacks who run similar offenses, trying to understand how to make it work at the highest level. He's throwing every day in the off-season. He's building chemistry with his new weapons. He's learning the new terminology, absorbing the new concepts, asking Mannion the kinds of detailed, specific questions that only a quarterback who truly cares about mastery asks. And then training camp starts. And reporters who cover him every day, people who see him up close, who watch the details, notice something. His footwork is crisper. His processing is faster. He's going through progressions at a speed that's genuinely different from what they saw a year ago. He's comfortable under center in a way that suggests real, dedicated work. He's throwing to running backs with an anticipation and trust that isn't just instinct, it's repetition. It's hours and hours and hours of work distilled into split-second decisions on the practice field. That's who Jalen Hurts is. And that's why, even with all the uncertainty around a brand new offensive system and a reshaped receiver room, the Eagles still feel like a team to be reckoned with. Because when your quarterback is doing that kind of preparation, when your quarterback is that connected to the process of getting better every day, you have a real chance. Every single season. There's one more thing we need to talk about. One more layer of this story that makes the 2026 Eagles camp feel different from other years. It's the energy. Football teams are complicated organisms. They're made up of dozens of individual personalities, each with their own goals and needs and histories. Getting all of those personalities pointed in the same direction is one of the hardest things a coaching staff can do. And yet, from every account coming out of Jefferson Health Training Complex, the 2026 Eagles have something that can't be manufactured or scheduled. They have genuine buy-in. Players like Saquon Barkley, who by his own admission is going into his 9th NFL season and has been through countless systems and countless coaches, are genuinely enthusiastic about this new approach. He said himself, he's never been in a system quite like this one. And instead of being exhausted by the newness, he's energized by it. Jordan Mailata, one of the great characters in the Eagles locker room, is calling the new coordinator an evil genius and clearly means it as the highest compliment. The linemen are embracing the new zone blocking concepts, which ask them to move differently, to think differently, to trust the scheme instead of just overpowering their opponent. DeVonta Smith is stepping into a bigger role with confidence, not anxiety. He's said the key is understanding the flow of the new system, and he's clearly done that work. Even the younger players, Lemon, Cooper, Wicks, are showing the kind of focus and hunger that suggests they understand the opportunity in front of them. And then there's Nick Sirianni, the head coach, who has intentionally not talked about last year's Super Bowl ring, who has kept the team focused entirely on the present, on the work, on what needs to happen right now, today, in this practice, in this rep, to get better. That kind of coaching, that ability to keep a championship team hungry instead of satisfied, is genuinely hard. And Sirianni is pulling it off. So where does this all leave us? What's the verdict after the first several days of Eagles training camp 2026? Here's what we know. Jalen Hurts is locked in. He's sharper than he was last year. He's embraced the new system with the kind of intellectual curiosity and physical commitment that makes coaches' eyes light up. He's building trust with new weapons. He's throwing the ball well over the middle, down the seam, to his running backs, to his tight end. He's under center. He's commanding the huddle. He looks like a quarterback who has unfinished business and knows exactly what he's going to do about it. The new offense is real. Sean Mannion's system isn't just a concept anymore. It's being executed on the field. The motion, the play action, the misdirection, the wide zone runs. It's happening. Players are buying in. The terminology is being absorbed. The flow of the offense is becoming natural. And the early results, Hurts connecting with receivers on tough, anticipatory throws, Barkley and Bigsby finding big holes in the running game, Goddard creating mismatches in the seam, those results are genuinely encouraging. The defense is going to be a force. Fangio's unit is entering year 3 with experience, talent, and depth at nearly every position. Carter's contract extension sends a clear message about how serious the Eagles are about keeping their best defenders. And watching Mitchell, DeJean, Bond, and Campbell work in practice tells you this defense is going to make life difficult for opposing offenses all season long. The depth is developing. From Darius Cooper making incredible diving catches to Tank Bigsby punishing defenders in the run game to Dontayvion Wicks going up and ripping footballs away from two defensive backs, this Eagles roster has players beyond the stars who are ready to contribute. That matters enormously over the course of a long, grinding NFL season. And the culture is right. Buy-in is complete. Enthusiasm is genuine. Focus is sharp. The team hasn't spent its summer basking in past glory. They've spent it working hard every day, getting better, preparing for the season with an urgency that suggests they know exactly what's at stake. The season is coming. The real games are coming. The pads go on. The joint practices happen. The preseason games happen. And then, Week 1. Real football. Real stakes. Defenses that have game planned for everything Mannion wants to do. Cornerbacks who've watched every film session available trying to figure out DeVonta Smith's tendencies. Defensive coordinators staying up until 3